Good evening, Montreal. Beryl Wiseman here, editor of the Suburban, with another edition of the Suburban Radio Hour. My friend and colleague Anthony Bonaparte, features editor, has the day off. We'll be joined by the wonderful Jennifer Cox. And, of course, Mark Lidbitter is here. Everything you need to know about sports. Mike Cohen will be coming in with entertainment and society news. Quite a week this has been. You'll read about how finally McGill administrators and politicians are condemning the anti-Israel program at McGill, the encampment, the supposed summer teaching program. I guess it took a poster from these miscreants sitting on the lower campus, a poster that had two people with AK-47s to finally wake up Montreal to understand that this has nothing to do, less to do with Israel and the Jews than their idea of what a perfect Islamist society would be. Read that article. That's important. Warnings from the Chamber of Commerce on the city on its spending and housing failures, which have been monumental. RCMP arrested Oka residents for inciting anti-Semitism. Great story on Strangers in the Night, going for its 19th edition. Beautiful story. Good, feel-good stories on Ville Marie teacher who's been feted. We're also going to be talking about some really concerning poverty statistics that came out this week. We've known about it for a while, but when it comes out from Sontrade, we need to talk about 300,000 Montreal households that lack basic minimum income. That's households. That's 900,000 to 1.2 million people. I'll be talking to Joel Chash about that. And first, I want to start out with this week. We saw the official announcement of Neil Oberman as the federal Conservative Party candidate in Mount Royal. He'll be going up against Anthony Housefather, but really he'll be going up against Justin Trudeau. He's been a friend of the show. We've worked so closely together. We've covered his efforts on the injunctions that have protected over 40 Jewish institutions from these Jew-hating mobs that are in the streets, the anti-Israel mobs. And it's our pleasure to have him on. This just happened on Wednesday. Neil Oberman, how has your life changed from that dramatic evening at the Grover Auditorium with Pierre Poilievre, Melissa Landsman, and everybody else?
Well, first, Beryl, thanks so much for having me on. A big hello to all your listeners. As you know, I'm a great fan of your show, and I want to say that my life hasn't changed. All it's done, it's gotten more busy and focused on doing the job that needs to be done to bring back safety, security to our communities, ensuring that not only do we have a future, but our children have a future. We need to fix the budget. We need to axe the taxes. We need to build homes, and we need to bring back security to our communities. So my job is like the job of any concerned citizen. When you can do something, you should do something. I have stood up. I know my neighbors and my friends have stood up. I'm just standing in a different way, but we're all facing the same direction, which is a brighter Canada for tomorrow.
And the reality is that Mount Royal riding is one of the largest concentrations of Jewish voters in the country. About a third of the riding, sometimes more, is Jewish. And both Pierre Poilievre and Melissa Landsman and you made the point that the one area of rising crime has come from the incredible upsurge in anti-Semitism, over 300%, by these, I don't even have a name for them. And you and they made a point that this is part of the fight on crime, a very important part, to bring security back to these communities and to give Jewish Canadians the same rights that all Canadians have.
So I want to say something, and I think it's important that your listeners hear this. What happens in the Jewish community is like a canary in the coal mine, right? It's the precursor. Whatever happens to us first happens to other communities thereafter. What's going on is not correct. It is not Quebec values. They aren't Canadian values. We are a society of tolerance, inclusion, not hate and division, which the Liberal government with Mr. Justin Trudeau sitting on his paper throne attempting to create more division amongst us. I want this message heard by every single person listening to this. I give you my solemn affirmation that when I am elected, and up until that time, I will continue to work for everybody in our community. We will be successful. We will bring back the rule of law. We will have safe communities, and our children will have a bright future in a Canada that you and I remember. Because the way things are going, it's not going to get better before it gets worse. Wake up. Wake up and see what is going on. And when you wake up and you see this, you will see the best option for you is Pierre, myself, Melissa, and the Conservative Party of Canada.
And as you so well said, whatever starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews. And we're now seeing it with these Islamists. It's no longer about Israel or the Jews. Now they want to change Canada to Sharia law. So that is the clear and present danger. But more than that, the program is a common sense revolution. It's one thing to get rid of crime and these miscreants. It's another thing to restore Canada to a place where we can live under a reasonable tax regime, not have wasteful spending from the federal government, and be able to build a future. And that's the common sense conservatism.
It is exactly that, Beryl. But I also want to remind the listeners that taxing rich people is not simply a way to take money from rich people. It impacts how business is done, how small business is able to capitalize its ventures, how communities build by funding. When people feel that there is no stability economically, they take their capital and they move outside of Canada. They go down south to the U.S. and make investments. You can't expect taxation of one community or one group of people to be the sort of cure for a larger problem, which is mismanagement of the budget of our great country of Canada, because you can't keep spending your way out of the problem. You have to learn there has to be cuts, but you have to put money in the right areas. Housing is very important. People need to live in homes. They need to feel that they have the security. You know, the concept of my home is my castle is not a flighty concept.
No, it's a legal
security
concept.
From it's the inviolable.
Section 7 of the Quebec Charter of Human Rights.
But it's also a concept that's been enshrined in our charter, because the home is where your family is. The home is where your children are. The home is where you live. And when people don't have a home, these things don't work well. And that is why under Pierre, myself, Melissa, and all the other Conservatives, they want to bring back the ability to buy a home. Okay, we need to be able to make it more affordable. Don't let the Liberals sell you a concept that the Conservatives are just for the fancy white rich people. This is their false narrative, like they have a false paper crown on top of Mr. Justin Trudeau's head. The reality is we will fix these problems. We will stop with the nonsense. We will bring common sense back. And more importantly, the most important thing, Canada will now be the beacon that it used to be. Because when your listeners open their door in the morning, I bet you a lot of them don't recognize where they live. And that's not because they can't see. It's because they see full well that the last 9 years of the Liberal government and their irregular, illiberal policies have caused nothing but division and destruction and chaos. I undertake to work hard for everybody in this riding, from the corner of Laird to the corner of Côte-des-Neiges and Bourrette to the corner of Côte-Saint-Luc Road. We will be heard, we will be seen, and we will bring a better country together, because we will join together as common sense Canadians and get rid of these people in Ottawa that have held us hostage for 9 years.
Neil Oberman, couldn't have written it better myself in an editorial. Good luck to you. We'll have you on again. We're going to follow your campaign, of course, with great interest.
God bless all you. And again, thank you so much for listening to me.
Take care, Neil. A lot of what Neil said about returning Canada, returning opportunity, has exploded a little bit last week in Montreal, with two important reports and groups of numbers. One, that 300,000 plus households don't have a minimum income to meet basic needs. That's anywhere from 900,000 to 1.2 million people. And the second is that Montreal still continues to lead Canada, and by the way, in North America, in renters. Maybe a new government will change that. I want to go through these two very important stories with my dear friend and colleague, Joel Chiashu. But first, Joel, there's a little bit of a good news story. BizNDG, tell us a little bit about it and what they're doing. It's making people feel better before we get into the numbers on the SunTrade report.
Yeah, well, happy to do so. So BizNDG is a local nonprofit merchant association, and NDG represents about 150, 160 businesses, mostly on the commercial arteries, the Monkland, Sherbrooke, Fielding, Upper Lachine, St. Jacques. It receives some funding from the borough, about $25,000 a year. But like other merchants associations, they offer marketing services, advocacy, contests, coaching, workshops, the typical fare. But something interesting happened last year. Now, the Ministry of Economy, Innovation, and Energy, that's Pierre Fitzgibbon's ministry, if I'm correct, put out a call for proposals for programs to help boost local commerce and local products. And BizNDG got their thinking cap on, and they came up with a plan called Ville Unie. Now, this is a program that helps to keep wealth circulating locally by stressing local products, local suppliers, and they're working in collaboration with the organization Les Produits du Québec, which you may be familiar with because they certify products based on their, the base origin of the contents of the products, where they're assembled, where they're manufactured. Anyway, their pitch was accepted, and they got a tiny little grant of about $700,000. And over the next year and a half, they're going to be launching various initiatives to do just that, promote local commerce around the island of Montreal. Now, they started last week in NDG with the launch of the Euro matches, the soccer matches. And that was a big hit because what they had was local merchants putting up TV screens and screening all the matches opening weekend and inviting people down. And people were coming over. There were pop-up sales, and there were booths, and there were products on display. There was a contest. It was a big hit. It's a great success story. And now their next activity is going to be at the Monkland Street Fest, I believe, which is in the third week of August. And then you're going to start seeing them around the island in neighboring boroughs because that's part of their mandate. So it's a great story for a local idea and a local gang.
Absolutely, no, and we're going to look forward to your continuing coverage of that. But let's talk a little bit about this incredible SunTrade report. We've always known that Montreal, according to federal figures, 34% of its households live below the poverty line. Now, the poverty line set is $24,500. Toronto's 20.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
What do you think the average household needs for renting, tenants need to cover housing, food, clothing, and transportation?
Well, I was actually going to get to that in the lead-in of how the numbers understate things. So Toronto is 29% below the federal poverty line, federal and provincial. Vancouver's 26%. But this is a different kind of measure. This measured minimum income for basic needs. So they set it at $31,000, which is still a bit laughable considering the fact that the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment, due to the influx of immigration, is $1,200. So how do you?
The lack of building,
well, there's a lack. There's a lack of building because of Madame Plante's brilliant 20-20-20 policy that doesn't work.
Well, I'll let you opine on that.
But how did SunTrade get this number? Because 300,000 households means 900,000 to 1.2 million people. It's
310,000 Montreal households. Now but here's another alarming point. That's about 18,000 more families than last year are on those rolls.
So Montreal under Mayor Blunt has growth in something. I did not mean any sarcasm.
So SunTrade working with, of all organizations, McKinsey, which, as you know, is
international consulting firm.
Right, and also, and sometimes less charitably referred to as the privatization ministry of various levels of government.
Correct.
They came up
of all governments. They work out of Boston. They're international.
They offer their services pro bono, and they came up with this program to create this measure. And SunTrade offers this measure, this threshold, every year to help drive the conversations about what has to happen. And what's particularly interesting is that last year, Centre, well, in the form of their exec, Claude Pinard,
Right.
he was named to the Gallup committee. Now, the
And
Gallup
Claude,
committee,
I know he's a remarkable professional in this field.
right? So, and he knows of what he speaks because this Gallup committee. Now, it's an acronym, a typical Quebec acronym orgy, but essentially what it is, it was the acceleration group comprised of philanthropists, business leaders, builders, community organizations who came together to work to accelerate the plan to create housing for the Hippodrome. Now, so he has his hands in the real numbers. Now, this number, it's not while it's a negative.
It's a shocking number, and it's shocking that it's been repeated every year, and governments have done nothing about it.
But it's growing. See, the fact that 18,000 more households than last year. That should be a major alarm bell for anybody who's paying attention.
But for our listeners, and we're just up against the clock, I would remind them, as we wrote in our editorial, that our mayor does have $300 million to buy parkland in the West Island that closed down a 25,000-person affordable housing community to build the biggest park in Canada in a city that has more green space per capita than any other, and a park that's never been built. It's never been built.
Right now.
It's never been built. But there's a lot of wetland. Joel Chiashu, thank you very much for this very important story.
Have a good evening.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
All right, we're going to turn to some more personal news that people need to know with her Chelsea St. Pierre. Chelsea, you had a very moving story on a mother and a doctor who warned about drowning risks this summer.
Yeah, well, I mean, Dr. Wasanji, who's a pediatric surgeon at the Montreal Children's Hospital, has warned parents about the risks of drowning once again, as many toddlers each year are brought to the ER from drowning experiences or near drowning experience. And what he really highlights is, drowning, or what is called dry drowning, when the children return home. So what's really important to highlight here, Beryl, is that it takes 8 seconds for a child to potentially drown. And that drowning doesn't necessarily occur at the moment that they're in the water. It can occur overnight from the water absorbed in their bodies. And there was a near drowning experience that happened with this mother, Catherine Couture, who revealed...
Who actually spoke to you about this. She had the courage to speak to you about this.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, she's a wonderful person. She was a CPE educator herself. And, there was plenty of supervision. She literally turned around to just grab her bottle of water, and then her other child ran up to her saying that their sibling was at the bottom of the pool. So she was in the water for as little as 10 seconds, but as I explained before, her mother jumped in and pulled her out. But it takes 8 seconds, for a toddler to potentially drown or die of drowning, even if it's at a later time, just from the water ingested. So it was very brave of her to share her story, because she opened herself up to potential judgment from other parents, from the public, particularly in the West Island. Families are very strong, and there's warnings every year. So people can never imagine that it would happen to them, but she just sent out a reminder of how easily this could happen. So it's very brave of her to
from both
of
them. The only solution is constant vigilance. Very briefly, before we run out of time, Strangers in the Night is getting rolling. August 31st is the date, and I understand they're going disco this year.
They're going disco this year,
but not just with any disco.
Not just with any disco, no. Strangers in the Night is never with just any. So this year, the Village people are
Larry
coming.
Day does incredible work.
Right. The Village people are coming, and Bonnie M. It's going to be held on August 31st.
And I know you're very excited about the Village people coming, aren't you?
Of course. Strangers in the Night is a West Island favorite, and I'm a West Island gal.
Wait a minute. You're not going to dress up like any of the Village people, are you?
Oh, come on. It's
are you going to dress as the cop, the construction worker? Who are the other two?
The Indian?
Hey, listen,
the Indian.
It's August 31st. We'll find out.
Okay.
So
I have something to look forward to. What we be wearing.
We never reveal our sources, Beryl, and we never reveal
our secrets.
Our secrets ahead of time.
Perfect.
So, you can't get me to share that on CJD.
I will not. I will respect your secrecy. Chelsea St. Pierre, thanks again for your great work.
Thank
you. We will be right back with Jennifer Cox on our some feature stories. But first, let's check in with the CJD Traffic Center.